When the Empire stood on the edge of annihilation, when chaos threatened to consume the world, a single figure emerged from the ashes of war. A man marked by prophecy since the moment of his birth, a warrior of impossible strength, a beacon of hope in humanity's darkest hour. He was no king, no noble, but a simple man destined for something far greater. As armies clashed and the fate of the Empire hung by a thread, one question began to echo across the land. Was this man truly Sigmar reborn, or merely a mortal chosen to carry his divine legacy? To understand the legend of Valten, you must first understand the Empire, a fractured realm of men, surrounded by endless threats, where every border burns and every victory is paid in blood. From the frozen north, the forces of chaos gather without end, bringing corruption, madness, and destruction. Beastmen stalk the forests, greenskins march in brutal hordes, and even death itself refuses to rest beneath the soil. In this world, survival is never guaranteed, and hope is a rare and fragile thing. But above all, there is Sigmar, the first emperor, the unifier of mankind, the god who rose from mortal flesh to divine legend. To the people of the Empire, Sigmar is not just a distant deity. He is their protector, their symbol, their last hope against the darkness. And for generations, one prophecy has endured: then the Empire's darkest hour, Sigmar would return. And then, in a small village deep within a Reichland, far from the great cities and battlefields of the Empire, a child was born, a blacksmith's son, raised among fire and iron, destined for a life no different from any other, or so it seemed. For upon his chest, marked since birth, was the sign of the twin-tailed comet, the most sacred symbol of Sigmar himself. To some, it was a blessing, a sign of salvation in a dying world. But to others, it was an omen, a warning that this child would bring war, destruction, and suffering. Fear spread quickly, whispers turning into suspicion, suspicion into dread. Because in the Empire, prophecies are never simple, and miracles often come at a terrible cost. From the very beginning, Valten was not meant to live an ordinary life. He was born in a legend. And then, the legend truly began, when the quiet village of Lackenbad was consumed by fire and blood. From the depths of the forest, the beastmen came, savage, relentless, creatures of chaos driven only by destruction. They tore through the village without mercy, slaughtering all in their path, turning homes into ashes and hope into despair. But in the midst of that nightmare, when all seemed lost, one man stood his ground. Valten, with nothing but the tools of a blacksmith and the strength within him. He stepped into the chaos. Blow after blow, he struck with a force no ordinary man should possess, crushing beasts, breaking bones, refusing to fall. And when he faced the leader of the horde, he did not run. He fought, and he won. In that moment, something changed. This was no longer just a man. This was the birth of a legend. And from the ashes of that battle, word began to spread. Tales of a lone warrior who stood against the beasts and did not fall. Of a man who fought with the strength of something far beyond mortal. These whispers carried across the Empire until they reached the ears of one man. Luther Huss, a warrior priest of Sigmar, a man of unshakable faith, driven not by doubt, but by belief. When Huss found Valten, he did not see a blacksmith's son, he saw a sign, a prophecy made flesh. And before all who would listen, he declared it without hesitation. This was no ordinary man. This was the chosen of Sigmar. From that moment on, everything changed. No longer just a survivor of a forgotten village, Valten became something greater, a symbol, a beacon, a living embodiment of hope. But with that faith came expectation, and with expectation came the weight of an entire empire. From that moment on, Valten was no longer just a man, and no longer just a legend in the making. Across the empire, word of the Chosen once spread like wildfire. Armies began to rally around his name. Cities spoke of him as salvation. and faith in Sigmar burned brighter than it had in generations. But with every hope that rose, so too did expectation. For in a world consumed by endless war, hope is never free. It is demanded, it is worshipped, and it is burdened upon those who carry it. Valten became more than a warrior. He became a symbol of unity, a banner for the broken empire, a living promise that mankind would not fall. And yet, to carry the hopes of millions is not a gift. It is a weight that grows heavier with every battle and every life that depends on your next step. And so, the Chosen of Sigmar marched to war. No longer a blacksmith, no longer just a symbol, but a living weapon against the darkness. With every battle, Valten proved what many had already begun to believe. This was no ordinary man. His strength was beyond mortal limits, his endurance unbreakable, and his presence alone was enough to turn fear into fury on the battlefield. At his side, he carried Gal Maraz, the sacred warhammer of Sigmar himself, a weapon of legend, a symbol of divine authority. Clad in armor worthy of God's champion, and riding a mighty war steed of elven bloodline, Valten became the embodiment of everything the Empire stood for. Wherever he rode, hope followed, and where hope stood, the enemies of mankind began to falter. But as hope rose within the Empire, so too did something far darker. From the frozen north, where the veil between worlds grows thin, a warlord unlike any other began his march. Archaon, the Everchosen of chaos, the harbinger of the end times, a being not of faith, but of ruin, chosen by the dark gods themselves to bring about the fall of the world. Where Valten inspired unity, Archaon spread despair. Where one carried the hopes of mankind, the other carried its inevitable destruction. And as their legends grew, so too did the certainty of one truth. These two forces were destined to collide, not just in battle, but in meaning. The Chosen of Sigmar against the Chosen of chaos. Hope against oblivion. And so, as the storm of chaos reached its peak, Valten marched at the very heart of the Empire's last great stand. No longer just a symbol, but a true champion of Sigmar, he fought across a world engulfed in war, where reality itself seemed to fracture beneath the weight of destruction. In the chaos of battle, Valten finally crossed paths with Archaon, the Everchosen of chaos, the harbinger of mankind's doom. Their clash was not a clean duel of legends, but a brutal encounter within a war that consumed everything around them. Steel met darkness, faith against ruin, and for a moment, the hope of the Empire stood face to face with its destruction. Valten fought with everything he had, striking against a power far beyond any mortal, refusing to yield even before the Chosen of the Dark Gods. But in the end, it was Archaon who struck him down, dealing a devastating blow that would end his part in the battle. Valten did not fall in glory, nor in victory, but in defiance. He was taken from the battlefield by Luther Huss, the warrior priest who had first proclaimed him the Chosen of Sigmar, and from that moment, Valten vanished from the eyes of history. There was no final proclamation, no confirmed fate written in stone. Only silence, only legend. Some whispered that he later died from his wounds. Others spoke in hushed tones of darker possibilities, that even in victory, the enemies of the Empire would not allow such a symbol to live. Among the most unsettling of these rumors was the name of Deathmaster Sniksh, a legendary Skaven assassin said to strike from the shadows, leaving no trace behind. But like all things surrounding Valten, the truth was never known. The storm of chaos eventually faded, leaving the Empire scarred but unbroken, and Valten's story became something greater than fact. In the courts of the Emperor Karl Franz, his name was still spoken with reverence, his image preserved as a symbol of hope. And among the faithful, Luther Huss continued to speak of him not as a fallen man, but as the Chosen who would one day return. Whether Valten was truly Sigmar reborn, or simply a mortal who rose when the world needed him most was never answered. Because in the end, it no longer mattered. He had already become something more than history. He had become legend. So what do you think? Was Valten truly Sigmar reborn, or just a man who became a legend? I read you in the comments.